Chapter 1681. Her gaze fell directly upon the few highest-ranking battle gods. Yet just as she was about to say something, Tang Wulin's voice rang out beside her ears, and her brows furrowed slightly as she declared, "I want to challenge the third battle god." The battle god hall held the group from Shrek Academy in very high regard, so the first, second, and third battle gods were all present. The fourth battle god was absent, and this was followed by the fifth, seventh, and eighth battle gods. Yinland had originally intended to challenge the first battle god, but she reluctantly changed her mind upon being dissuaded by Tang Wulin. The third battle god was a hyper Douluo, and he cast his gaze toward Guan Yue, while all of his companions directed their attention toward him. The battle god hall had already suffered 2 losses. They couldn't afford to lose anymore. If that were to happen, the battle god hall's reputation would be swept to the ground. Furthermore, their side had made the challenge during the second round, and that was already breaking some rules of the battle god hall, but they still hadn't won that match. Shu Lizzie had held back, so the gluttony Douluo was actually already awake, but he refused to open his eyes as he felt far too embarrassed. He didn't even get a chance to use his most powerful soul skills before he was literally cooked. The third battle god strode forward while appraising Yinland with an intense gaze, then made an inviting hand gesture toward her. The two of them entered the battle area, and in the instant that they did so, both their auras immediately began to spike. A fearlessly sharp aura erupted out of Yinland's body, and a series of rifts had appeared in the surrounding air in the face of her unmatched sword intent. In contrast, the third battle god was as still and resolute as a mountain, and even though his outward appearance was very ordinary, his mountainous aura struck one with a sense of immense pressure. This match was different from the first two in that it was a clash between a pair of assault system soul masters. Ling Zichen was standing by Tang Wulin's side, appraising the battlefield with an unblinking gaze, and a series of emotions had welled up in her heart as the battles had progressed. The emotion that she was struck by while witnessing Shishi's battle was surprising. Shishi's instantaneous explosive prowess made her feel as if she were witnessing the rise of the future king of agility attack system soul masters. She had interacted with Shishi on many occasions, and she had even scolded him in the past, but he always reacted with a lackadaisical smile, completely contrasting with the image of a powerful being. As for Shu Lizzie, she had always known that he was a food system soul master, and in her eyes, all he was good for was making steamed buns. However, he was a 4-word battle armor master. Despite her immense pride, she was well aware of what a 4-word battle armor master entailed. She stole a glance at the man standing beside her, and only now was she realizing just how powerful his companions were. It seemed that her fixation on her research had made her very narrow-minded. While it was true that technology had made the human race more powerful overall, the most powerful human beings in this world were still soul masters. Third battle god of the battle god hall, Dark Emperor Douluo Uhenu. Please enlighten me. The third battle god of the battle god hall was a vastly renowned powerful being, and he was a veteran hyper Douluo who was close to rank 97 in soul power. Star god Douluo Yinland of Shrek 7 monsters. Please enlighten me. Yinland was the first person from the Shrek Academy camp to declare a Douluo title. Indeed, this young woman, who appeared to only be in her 20s, was also a titled Douluo. In addition to Tang Wulin and Yuan and Yui, the latter of whom had displayed powers exceeding the titled Douluo level on enrollment day, Shrek 7 monsters already had 4 titled Douluo. This was a stunning revelation for the battle god hall camp. One had to realize that Shrek Academy had been completely annihilated not too long ago. In the face of the 2 Godslayer missiles, almost all of the powerful beings of Shrek Academy from the older generation had perished. However, during just a few short years, Shrek Academy had been rebuilt, and there were already so many formidable individuals among Shrek 7 monsters. Furthermore, there was still a whole host of limit Douluo in Shrek Academy. It seemed that the foundation that Shrek Academy had built up over the past 20,000 years had allowed it to recover at an astonishing rate. Guan Yue gave an internal nod as a hint of approval flashed through his eyes. Of course, he didn't allow the other battle gods to detect this. A burst of bright light flashed over the heavens, and in the next instant, Yinland's eyes were glowing like a pair of beacons. She was like a sharp sword that had just been drawn out of its scabbard as she instantly flew over to Luo Yuhang, who raised his right hand, which was completely covered in black scales at this point, just in time to block Yinland's lightning-fast attack. Only then did a sharp screeching sound ring out, and this delay indicated that Yinland's sword had exceeded the speed of sound. A burst of black energy surged out of Luo Yuhang's body like a volcanic eruption, forcing Yinland back into a retreat. In the instant that the battle had commenced, Yinland's eyes had turned completely cold and emotionless. Another sharp screech rang out as bursts of scintillating light erupted out of her body, making her appear as if she were an incandescent star in the sky. A dense sword net that was decorated with dazzling starlight then descended from the heavens. This was her sword god net. The sword god net was giving off an indescribably formidable aura, as if everything in its presence was simply meant to be torn apart. Luo Yuhang didn't dare to engage in passive defense any longer. He knew that when given the opportunity, a master swordsman would be able to continuously elevate their sword intent. At some point, even his mind and spirit would eventually be affected by her. Thus, he stepped forward, and 9 black soul rings emerged from beneath his feet. The third soul ring lit up as he thrust his right fist forward, and a massive blackish purple dragon's head erupted out of his fist, unleashing a thunderous roar that struck terror directly into one's heart. His martial soul is the Dark Emperor Dragon. Sima Jinkai said. Tang Wulin nodded in response. The Dark Emperor Dragon was an extremely powerful type of true dragon in the Dragon clan, and with one more evolution, it would become a Darkness Holy Dragon, ranking it alongside the Holy Radiant Dragon. It was exactly because Luo Yuhang was yet to complete this evolution that he was struggling to reach the limit Douluo rank. However, in any case, the Dark Emperor Dragon was still an extremely formidable martial soul. A hint of irony appeared in Sima Jinkai's eyes at the thought that someone was displaying a dragon-type martial soul in the presence of himself and Tang Wulin. Boom. The sword net was shattered, as was the dragon's head. Neither side was able to gain an upper hand. Yinland curled up into a ball, and scintillating light radiated from her body as she descended like a shooting star. This was her sword starfall. At the same time, Luo Yuhang's eyes turned a purple color, and he threw his head back to let loose a thunderous dragon's roar while a purple ball of light appeared between his 2 hands. A layer of dark purple light erupted out of his body, and he squatted down slightly before launching himself directly up toward Yinland. A burst of thunderous rumbling rang out, and the entire protective barrier instantly brightened by severalfold. Just as Ling Zichen had described, the protective barrier would adjust its power output in accordance to the eruptions of energy taking place within it. This was a pure clash of power with devastating sword intent on one side, and suffocating darkness on the other. The 2 sides were constantly clashing, but neither could gain the upper hand. Yinland's Star God sword was simply far too sharp. Even a seasoned hyper Douluo like Luo Yuhang had to reserve some of his power to nullify the sharpness of her sword intent. At the same time, his aura of darkness was also constantly trying to seep into Yinland's body, only to be torn apart by her sword intent every single time. This match was clearly far more fierce than the first 2. Yinland's attacks had already achieved return to simplicity. She had mastered sword intent, then sword soul, and she was now beginning to grasp sword essence. There was no one more fixated, perhaps even obsessive, among all of Shrek 7 monsters. It was as if she had been born to wield a sword. She had completely immersed her heart in her Star God sword, and the longer the battle wore on, the brighter her eyes became. She had always had the strongest desire for battle, and among Shrek 7 monsters, she was the one who challenged Tang Wulin the most. Furthermore, the defeats that she suffered at Tang Wulin's hands only served to fuel her determination and desire. Throughout their past sparring matches, Tang Wulin had learned that Yinland was at her most powerful in the instant before her soul power completely ran out. She was like a dazzling star that glowed brightest only as it became a supernova in its dying moments. As such, Luo Yuhang could sense that his opponent was only becoming more and more formidable as their battle stretched on. Every single one of her movements and even the look in her eyes were filled with her sword intent, and it was scarcely believable that a person could give off such a fearsome aura of sharpness. Chapter 1682. Not only did Shrek 7 monsters have a powerful food system soul master and a formidable agility attack system soul master, their assault system soul master wasn't letting them down, either. All of the battle guards were watching the battle intently. They were very familiar with Luo Yuhang's power and battle style, and they knew that he excelled the most in direct clashes of power. However, this little girl from Shrek Academy was fighting fire with fire, and she was completely holding her own. How could they not be astonished by this? Neither side had donned their battle armor, but the battle had already reached an extremely high level of intensity. As a hyper Douluo, Luo Yuhang obviously held the advantage when it came to cultivation rank, but he hadn't attained an advantage at all. The air was being constantly shredded by Yinland's Star God sword, and the dark aura permeating throughout the battlefield was being devoured incessantly by the spatial rifts that were being torn open. It was as if Yinland had transformed into a sword herself, and Luo Yuhang felt as if he were facing a meteor shower that was only growing more and more powerful. Clang! Yinland's body was sent flying, and she crashed into the protective barrier in the distance. However, Luo Yuhang wasn't in great shape, either. A large section of the scales on his right arm had been scraped off by the Star God sword, leaving a significant wound. Yinland instantly rebounded from the barrier, and her eyes only became brighter. All of a sudden, she switched to a two-handed grip on her sword, and her seventh soul ring lit up as she unleashed her Star God sword body. A burst of fearless sword intent erupted forth, and Yinland's entire body became the same color as starlight. In the next instant, her sixth soul ring lit up as she unleashed her sword Star Soul. Luo Yuhang's heart jolted slightly upon seeing this, and he knew that a ferocious storm was coming. He immediately unleashed his own martial soul true body, transforming into a giant dark emperor dragon before opening his mouth to release a fierce burst of dragon's breath. However, Yinland made no effort to take evasive measures as she charged directly toward Luo Yuhang's attack. The black dragon's breath was sliced apart by her sword, and she was on the verge of flying into Luo Yuhang's mouth. In his dark emperor dragon form, Luo Yuhang's body was around 30 meters in length with a single horn on the top of his head, and he had no choice but to close his mouth as he lowered his own head to withstand the attack using his horn. Clang! In the instant that the sword came into contact with the Dark Emperor Dragon, its entire massive body began to spasm as it was forced down onto the ground, while Yinland was repelled upward. Her fearsome sword intent continued to elevate as an indescribably reckless aura erupted out of her body. Her eyes were filled with determination, pride, and even a hint of insanity. The true essence of the sword could be reflected through many forms, such as a sword of persistence and dedication, where life and death were inconsequential. Yinland's personality wasn't suited for the path of regal domination that Tang Wuling had found for himself as she wasn't a natural leader. As such, she had found her own path through unwavering determination and dedication at all costs. During her sparring matches with her friends, there was no way that she could unleash such an attack, but now that she was facing a formidable opponent outside of her circle of friends, she was finally able to completely let go and express herself to her heart's extent. Eighth soul skill, Starfall. Hovering high up in midair, Yinland was like a radiant star that was burning through the final part of its own life force. Everything around her paled into insignificance. Luo Yuhang's cultivation base was superior to hers, but in the face of her radiance, Luo Yuhang felt as if his entire body had become stiff and paralyzed. Is this still a sparring match? This girl is clearly putting her life on the line. The space near Yinland began to shatter as inky black spatial cracks appeared all around her. However, there seemed to be countless specks of starlight with these cracks, and they were all injecting their radiance into her body, causing her aura to spike at a drastic rate. Luo Yuhang had a vast wealth of practical battle experience, and he knew that he couldn't wait any longer. He didn't know what Yinland was doing, but what he did know was that if he were to allow her to do as she pleased, he would be facing an attack that would pose a huge threat to his life. Yinland seemed to be unleashing some type of self-sacrificial attack that was drawing upon the power of celestial bodies. With that in mind, Luo Yuhang immediately sprang into action, reverting back to his human form while a suit of dark purple three-word battle armor encapsulated his entire body. At the same time, a purple halo appeared beneath his feet, and his aura of darkness instantly spiked drastically. In the next instant, his eighth soul ring lit up as he prepared his Dark Emperor Devil Dragon Strike. A cyclone of darkness instantly rose up into the air directly toward Yinland. In this situation, Luo Yuhang couldn't afford to hold back any longer and was unleashing a full power attack under the enhancement of his three-word battle armor. At this moment, Yinland had her eyes closed rather than watching her opponent. It was as if she were completely immersed in another world. Right as the cyclone was about to reach her, she finally sprang into action. Dazzling starlight exploded, illuminating the entire area, and all of the darkness was instantly dispelled. There was no explosion or loud commotion. It was as if space and time had fallen completely still in that instant. In the instant that the explosion of light took place, Tang Wuling was no longer able to sense Yinland's aura, and he immediately took a step forward in an alarmed manner, only to be stopped by a firm hand on his arm. Tang Wuling turned to find Shu Lizzie looking on with an anxious yet determined expression. Sister Yinland has been waiting for this opportunity for a very, very long time, so we can't stop her. Otherwise, there would be an even greater chance for things to go wrong. Tang Wuling instantly understood what he was saying. Is she trying to attain enlightenment by risking her own life? Shu Lizzie nodded in response. Tang Wuling took a deep breath upon hearing this. He really wanted to ask why Shu Lizzie hadn't stopped her. She could have easily pursued sword essence in a more gradual and safer method. Why did she insist on going to such extremes? This was an extremely perilous situation, and the slightest misstep could result in her death. Shu Lizzie sighed. Sister Yinland has already been a titled Douluo for some time now, but she still doesn't have a ninth soul skill as she's been forcibly repressing her ninth soul skill from taking shape. I didn't try to dissuade her as I support all of her decisions. Tang Wuling heaved a faint sigh and patted Shu Lizzie on the shoulder before falling silent. Yinland was a proud person. That was something that Tang Wuling had figured out from their very first meeting. Her unwillingness to accept defeat was constantly pushing her forward, and if it were for Tang Wuling, perhaps her pride would be even further elevated. Her defeats to Tang Wuling did nothing to dent her pride. They simply made her pride more condensed and repressed. She had always been pursuing the extreme upper limit of swordsmanship, but the world wasn't fair, and it was often the case that aptitude was a decisive factor in many things. It was exactly because of this that no matter how hard Yinland worked, she continued to lag behind in her cultivation rank compared with Yuan and Yui, who possessed supreme aptitude. With her twin martial souls and the guidance from her Ming, Yuan and Yui was rapidly becoming more powerful. In the past, she and Yinland had been roughly evenly matched, but recently, a widening gap had begun to appear between them. Yinland was already struggling to come to terms with the fact that she simply couldn't defeat Tang Wuling, and it was unacceptable for her to lose to Yuan and Yui as well. Chapter 1683. She knew that only by attaining sword essence would she be able to stand alongside her friends on the pinnacle of this world, and only then would she be able to allow her repressed pride to fully flourish. All of these repressed emotions erupted in this very instant. She hadn't donned her suit of battle armor as she wanted to better immerse herself in this experience, to push herself as close to the brink of death as possible. Only after around 10 seconds had passed did the light begin to fade, and both sides were appraising the battle with tense expressions. During that explosion, the protective barrier had been forced close to its absolute limit. One had to realize that this barrier had been designed with four-word battle armor limit Douluo in mind. That was a clear testament to just how fearsome that explosion had been. Thump. A body fell out of the sky and crashed heavily down onto the ground. As the light faded, it was revealed that this was Luo Yuang. However, he was currently in terrible condition. His three-word was in tatters, and his body was riddled with countless wounds. His aura was extremely feeble, and if it weren't for the minute rise and fall of his chest, one could easily mistake him to be dead. It was also at this moment that a ball of light descended from above. The ball of light was only just over a meter in diameter, and there seemed to be a figure curled up into a ball inside it, but it was impossible to see the figure clearly. Everyone from both sides immediately rushed into the battle area. As they did so, the first thing they sensed wasn't violent energy. Instead, it was a sense of purity, as if the battle area had been basked in the purest sunlight. Tang Wuling and Shu Lizzie instantly rushed over to the ball of light, which had transformed into a cocoon that was solid to the touch. Tang Wuling was just about to break the cocoon open, only to be stopped by Shu Lizzie, who unleashed his controlling crane capturing dragon to draw the cocoon into his own grasp. On the other side, Luo Yuhang's condition had improved slightly following some emergency treatment administered by the healing system soul masters of the Battle God Hall. However, his eyes were currently filled with horror. There was no one in this world who didn't fear death, and this applied even to Hyper Douluo. After ascertaining Luo Yuhang to be in stable condition, Guan Yue asked, "Who won?" Luo Yuhang replied with a wry smile, "I don't know. I guess it was a tie. She withdrew her light at the last moment, and that's why we're both still alive. If she hadn't done that, we'd both be dead right now. That girl really is something else. This is the first time I've seen someone fight with such a suicidal style." Guan Yue heaved a resigned sigh in response. Shrek Academy has always accepted only monsters. There's not much you can do but accept your bad luck here. The battle gods vacated the battle area, while the cocoon was carried back to the Shrek Academy camp before being placed on the ground. No one knew what condition Yinland was currently in, nor whether she was in any danger. Tang Wuling turned to Shu Lizzie and asked, "Should I take her back to my mother for treatment?" Shu Lizzie shook his head in response. Sister Yinland told me that if she were to enter some type of special state, then just leave her be. This is a hurdle she must overcome. I'll stay here to protect her, so I won't go on with all of you any longer. All right, Tang Wuling replied with a nod. Back when Shu Lizzie's battle armor was only at the two-word level, its name had been Guardian Star, and he was fulfilling this promise right now. Tang Wuling could see that he was very concerned, but he knew that there was nothing he could say to alleviate Shu Lizzie's worries. Yinland had chosen this path for a reason, and now, all everyone could do was hope that this would be a new beginning for her, rather than the end. Yuan and Yui took a long glance at the cocoon, and she didn't say anything, but her hands had clenched up into tight fists. Just as she was about to step forward, another figure stepped out ahead of her, with his short golden hair, bright eyes, handsome features, and holy aura. It was Yue Zhengyu. Yuan and Yui wasn't the only one to have been affected by Yinland's battle. As As Yinland was glowing brighter than she ever had, Uhenu felt as if a flame had been ignited in his heart. One of the most powerful abilities of the Holy Angel clan was sacrifice. A Holy Angel had to constantly be prepared to sacrifice themselves for the sake of others. Uhenu had the courage to sacrifice himself for others, but he didn't possess the courage to risk his life for a breakthrough as Yinland did. In that instant, he finally understood why he was unable to catch up to Yinland despite possessing a martial soul of a superior caliber. He simply wasn't dedicated enough. Among Shrek's 7 monsters, it could be said that Yinland possessed one of the worst martial souls, yet she was always among the top 3 most powerful members. Uhenu felt as if he had worked very hard and was extremely diligent in his cultivation, but having witnessed Yinland's stunning display, he finally understood what he was lacking. It was the determination and resolve to sacrifice everything. As such, he had stepped forward. Through witnessing Yinland's breakthrough, he felt as if he had seen the catalyst for a breakthrough of his own. For soul masters, it was often the case that an instant of enlightenment could change many things, and Uhenu seemed to have captured that instant of enlightenment. An unprecedentedly determined look appeared in his eyes, and an aura of light rose up around him, illuminating his entire body. This is our time. Uhenu strode into the protective barrier with purpose in his step. Just like Shishi, he was still yet to become a titled Douluo, but he was already at rank 89 in soul power. The residual aura of starlight in the protective barrier hadn't completely faded yet, so there was a massive abundance of light elements, and that was another factor that made him decide to step forward. He cast his gaze toward the battle gods, and declared, I want to challenge the 7th battle god. The 7th battle god strode into the battle area, and in contrast with the battle gods before her, the 7th battle god was a woman. She appeared to be in her 40s, and had a very imposing figure. She flexed her neck as she cast her gaze toward Uhenu with an aggressive look in her eyes. The battle god hall had already suffered 2 losses and a tie. This was simply unacceptable. Did this mean that the battle god hall was inferior to Shrek Academy? This had always been the case in the past, but this was no longer the Shrek Academy of old, and they were only facing the younger generation of the academy. Surely they were superior. At this point, the match had become a battle for dignity, and the battle god hall couldn't afford to lose anymore. There was a rule in the battle god hall stipulating that challengers had the right to choose which battle gods they wanted to challenge, as the battle gods had an inherent home court advantage, but it seemed that this advantage didn't exist here. In the beginning, all of the battle gods, including Guan Yue, reflexively underestimated their opponents because of how young they were. In their eyes, these young people would require more development before they could pose a substantial threat to the battle god hall. However, the reality was that these young people were mature beyond their years and were far more powerful than the battle gods had imagined. In a clash where both sides were equal in power, the side that was able to choose their opponents would undoubtedly have a very clear advantage. They could even match up their most powerful beings against their weakest opponents, thereby securing many guaranteed victories. Chapter 1684. As such, none of the battle gods dared to look down on their opponents any longer. Uhenu of Shrek Academy, please enlighten me. Uhenu declared, 7th battle god of the battle god hall, Begonia Douluo Shimengshan, please enlighten me. Shimengshan responded in kind. Tang Wulin's heart stirred slightly upon hearing Shimengshan's Douluo title, and he immediately thought of an extremely rare type of martial soul. Meanwhile, Uhenu was appraising his opponent with a solemn expression. Prior to coming here, they based their training drills on the information they had about the battle god hall. The rankings of the 18 battle gods regularly changed, so it would be impossible to choose their opponents based on the numbers alone. However, there were some battle gods who were renowned due to certain characteristics. For example, female battle gods were very rare. As such, Uhenu had already guessed his opponent's identity before making his choice, and upon hearing confirmation of this, a faint smile appeared on his face. In terms of appearance, Uhenu was roughly on par with Tang Wulin, and with his bright and energetic aura, his smile was very alluring. However, in the eyes of Shimengshan, this smile was a sign that she was being slighted by her opponent. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a suit of rose-red battle armor instantly encapsulated her entire body. That's right, she had released her battle armor right away and was displaying no intention of holding back. At the same time, she had also summoned her weapon, and it came as quite a surprise to Uhenu. This was a gigantic hammer with a rectangular head. The 2 sides of the head were tapered toward the center, making them appear even larger than they were, and the total length of the hammer's head was close to Shimengshan's height. The shaft of the hammer also exceeded 2 meters in length, and overall, it was no less impressive than the forging hammers that Tang Wulin and Yuan and Yue had used in the past. The hammer was also of a rose-red color, and there were extremely complex cell circuits engraved on its surface. A red hexagram appeared beneath her feet, and even though it only had a diameter of roughly 5 meters, her entire aura transformed into one of explosive violence with the emergence of her battle armor domain. Air currents surged around her body, and it was as if the very air was exploding in her immediate vicinity. Wasn't her martial soul supposed to be the 9-heart Begonia? This was supposed to be a martial soul that was renowned for its lethal poison, so why did her battle armor appear as if it had been designed to maximize her strength? In Uenu's mind, Shimengshan was supposed to have staked a claim among the battle gods with her Begonia martial soul. Her combat prowess was nothing special among the battle gods, but her poison was extremely formidable, so overall, she was ranked above average. However, it seems that he had made a misjudgment. Shimengshan was completely different from how he had imagined her to be. Looking at that incredible weapon of hers, Uhenu knew that he was in for a grueling battle. Thus, he also immediately donned his suit of battle armor. This suit of golden battle armor was very elegant and streamlined, and the main color scheme was comprised of white and gold. The breastplate was a single piece of armor, and the giant golden wings were extremely spectacular to behold. This was something that he had specifically requested during the construction of his battle armor. In his eyes, an angel had to have a pair of wings. The armor around his torso and thighs was also in one unbroken piece, but he was still missing the armor for his limbs, as well as his helmet. Of course, the completed pieces of armor were all 4-word battle armor. At the center of the breastplate were 18 glowing golden gems that were arranged into a V shape, adding further flair and radiance to his battle armor. Uhenu had always been a fan of spectacular and radiant things, and his battle armor perfectly reflected this. As soon as he donned these pieces of 4-word battle armor, his aura instantly spiked to a whole new level. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and closed his eyes as golden light radiated from his body. A 6-winged angel projection appears behind him, illuminating the entire battle area and filling it with abundant light elements. Shimengshan made the first move, charging toward Uhenu before raising her giant hammer. In her hands, the massive hammer was made to look as if it were completely weightless, and it came crashing down toward Uenu's head like lightning. Uhenu naturally didn't dare to take this attack head on, and he immediately dodged to the side using his ghost shadow perplexing track. However, Shimengshan made no effort to alter the direction of her attack, allowing it to slam viciously onto the ground. A resounding boom rang out as the entire protective barrier around the battle area flashed, and Uhenu shuddered violently in the face of the powerful shockwaves. As a result, his mind went completely blank for an instant, and he temporarily lost his sense of hearing. Right at this moment, Shimengshan raised her giant hammer again, and bright red light radiated from the hammer, while the domain halo beneath her feet expanded to resonate with her weapon. In that instant, it was as if her massive hammer had transformed into a glowing ruby as it came crashing down toward Uhenu again. This style of battle was extremely brutal and straightforward, and outside the protective barrier, Arhang was looking on with glowing eyes. That's it. That's the way. Sima Jinkai raised an eyebrow as he asked, which side are you on? Arhang replied, I'm complimenting her style of battle. I love violent and straightforward women like her. Sima Jinkai's eyelids twitched slightly upon hearing this, and he reflexively stepped away to distance himself from Arhang. Thankfully for Uhenu, his battle armor nullified most of the impact, but by the time he returned to his senses, the giant hammer was already upon him. He didn't possess a teleportation ability like Shishi, and he was caught completely off guard by such a major crisis. Right at this moment, the golden gems on his breastplate lit up, and a golden V-shaped burst of light erupted out of his chest directly toward his opponent. At the same time, he took a half step backward and summoned a holy sword in his hand, which he slashed up toward the oncoming hammer. There was no way for him to evade, so he could only weather the storm. Clang! The golden light struck Shimengshan's body, and she made no attempt to evade it as bright red light erupted from her battle armor, withstanding the attack for her. She was only forced back half a step by the force of the impact, but her giant hammer was still crashing down upon Uhenu. Boom! Yue's Hengyu was sent flying as bright red light flashed all over his body, and the holy sword in his hand was instantly shattered into specks of golden light. No one from the Shrek Academy camp had imagined that Xi Mengshan's style of battle would be so simple and direct, but at the same time, they had to admit that it was very effective. The might of her giant hammer exceeded everyone's expectations, and just her strength alone would have been enough to make her the seventh battle god. The hammer struck the ground, and Xi Mengshan faltered momentarily. Her second hammer blow was extremely powerful, but she had to expend a certain price to unleash it. Chapter 1685. However, she only paused for an instant before borrowing the force of her hammer's impact to swivel around and charge directly toward Yue's Hengyu. Her entire body was acting as a center of balance for her giant hammer as he spun rapidly like a lethal cyclone while speeding directly toward her opponent. At this moment, Yue's Hengyu was still reeling from the last attack. His arms were numb, there was blood flowing out of the corner of his lips, and his heart was filled with remorse and self-criticism. He had misjudged his opponent and not taken her as seriously as he should have, thereby resulting in his current crisis. His opponent's attack was far too overbearing, to the extent that he felt as if he were being suffocated. Golden light flashed through his eyes as he forcibly summoned a pillar of light of judgment, but his limbs were still numb, so it was very difficult for him to try and evade. Meanwhile, Xi Mengshan charged straight into the light of judgment like a madwoman, withstanding the attack with her battle armor before swinging her hammer toward Yue's Hengyu again with devastating force. Yue's Hengyu was only just barely able to inject some soul power into his wings before flapping them vigorously to carry himself backward in retreat. In this instant, Yue's Hengyu was very thankful for his decision to request for a pair of wings. His arms and legs weren't working here, but the wings of his four-word battle armor were very reliable, allowing him to fly back for a sufficient distance. However, even though he had evaded the brunt of the attack, he was still struck by a small portion of its power, and even with his four-word battle armor to protect him, he couldn't help but throw up a mouthful of blood. Even a hyper-Douluo's offensive prowess would most likely only be limited to this, let alone a title Douluo, and Yue's Hengyu felt completely powerless. Xi Mengshan harumphed coldly as bright red light radiated from her body, and she charged directly toward Yue's Hengyu. At this point, Yue's Hengyu had regained some feeling in his limbs through soul power circulation, and he immediately turned and fled without any hesitation. It was far too dangerous to engage in melee combat with Xi Mengshan. He had to open up some distance between them. Thankfully, he had the speed advantage due to his wings. Only then did everyone notice that Xi Mengshan's three-word battle armor had no wings. Generally speaking, all suits of three-word battle armor had wings of different descriptions depending on the Soulmaster's individual requirements, and wings were extremely valuable to assist Soulmasters in their flight. Even though high-grade Soulmasters could fly on their own, it was made easier by a pair of wings. However, Xi Mengshan seemed to have focused most of her destructive power on her weapon, but this weapon wasn't her martial soul. Xi Mengshan stepped forward as she set off in pursuit of Yue's Hengyu again while raising her giant hammer. Yue's Hengyu could only flap his wings vigorously and continue to zip around like a panicked fly. Thus far, the battle was completely one-sided, but Tang Wulian suddenly noticed that for some reason, Guan Yue had a rather strange look on his face. It was a mixture of resignation intermingled with a fallen expression. Why was he displaying such an expression? Meanwhile, Yue's Hengyu was flying around while spilling his opponent with his light of judgment, and he was beginning to catch his breath again. Xi Mengshan was still pursuing him, and up to this point, she hadn't even released her martial soul yet. All of a sudden, she drew to a halt at the exact center of the battle area. She set her hammer aside, then suddenly withdrew her battle armor to reveal a mocking smile on her face. Coward. A series of soul rings emerged from beneath her feet as she spoke, and at the same time, thick vines and branches began to grow behind her, while a giant white flower bloomed in the blink of an eye. This was the nine-heart begonia. The huge flower gently swayed as it released a plume of faint pink mist, and Xi Mengshan's soul rings were flashing almost intermittently as a series of halos proliferated outward from the giant flower to encompass the entire battle area. The nine-heart begonia was a poison-type martial soul, and its forte was control. That's right, according to the Tangsex records, Xi Mengshan was supposed to be a control system soulmaster, but the display she had just put on was clearly one of an assault system soulmaster. The halos quickly spread to Yue's Hengyu, and after this period of respite, Yue's Hengyu was in better condition, even though he still felt as if his organs were on fire. This was thanks to the fact that light elements possessed potent healing properties. He focused his attention, and dazzling golden holy flames erupted out of his body. The angel projection behind him fused as one with him as he unleashed his holy angel descends, and in the next instant, the halos being released by the nine-heart begonia descended upon him, only for the majority of them to be incinerated into nothingness by his holy flames. The holy flames were the bane of all poison, and even though it couldn't completely counter all poisons, it would definitely be able to nullify most of their effects. As such, Yue's Hengyu was confident that he would be able to counter Xi Mengshan's nine-heart begonia, which was why he had chosen her. Even if he would be somewhat affected by the poison, that was not an issue as he could go to Tang Wulian after the battle, and Tang Wulian's beautiful silk tulip would be able to cure him with ease. After learning about how Tang Wulian had obtained the beautiful silk tulip as a soul spirit, Zheng Yuren didn't even have the heart to challenge him for sparring matches anymore. With that soul spirit, Tang Wulian was a walking panacea. After releasing those halos, Xi Mengshan was appraising Yue's Hengyu intently. Her poison possessed many different effects, one for each soul ring that she possessed, and all of those effects were extremely dangerous. They included poison, feebleness, sluggishness, dizziness, atrophy, fear, etc. against opponents with lackluster resistance against poisons. She could bring them down without even lifting a single finger. However, it was clear that her opponent possessed exceptional poison resistance. Xi Mengshan's brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this, and in the next instant, she donned her suit of battle armor again. At the same time, her martial soul vanished, and Tang Wulian immediately understood what was going on. Why was it that Xi Mengshan's battle styles were completely different depending on whether she was wearing her battle armor? It was because there was no synergy between her battle armor and martial soul. For a soul master, it was naturally ideal for their battle armor and martial soul to have a synergistic relationship, thereby allowing them to maximize the power of their martial soul. As such, battle armor was most often used for protection and to enhance one's soul skills. However, Xi Mengshan had walked a completely different path, thereby luring Yue's Hengyu into a false assessment of her powers and forcing him onto the back foot from the get-go. Xi Mengshan's battle armor was completely unrelated to her martial soul. In fact, this suit of battle armor hadn't even been crafted for her. Instead, she had inherited it from another powerful senior of the Battle God Hall in an extremely rare case. Even though it was only a suit of three-word battle armor, it was close to four-word battle armor in certain aspects. Xi Mengshan was a control system soulmaster, but she had always had a dream to become an assault system soulmaster. However, her martial soul simply didn't allow her to pursue that dream, and she had always lamented her ill fortune. Chapter 1686. As her cultivation rank improved, she attained her suit of two-word battle armor, and up to that point, everything was still normal in that her battle armor had been designed to enhance her martial soul. However, once she became a soul sage, she discovered a problem. Among all poison-type martial souls, her nine-heart begonia stood at the very pinnacle, and there was a law of diminishing returns when it came to enhancing poison through battle armor. After careful calculations, she discovered that once she reached the title Douluo level, the poison of her nine-heart begonia would reach a point of saturation in this world. This meant that at the very most, her battle armor would only be able to increase the scope that her poison acted upon, but would be unable to improve her poison's potency. Thus, the benefit would be far from pronounced. Xi Mengshan was extremely dejected by this. If her battle armor couldn't significantly enhance her powers, then she would never be able to rise to the very top of the Soulmaster world. As such, even though she was held in very high regard in the Battle God Hall as a control system Soulmaster, she was constantly unhappy, all the way until she discovered this suit of Battle God Hall while inspecting the warehouse of the Battle God Hall. At the time, she was hesitating about whether she should upgrade her battle armor to the three-word level, and contemplating how much of a difference it would even make. As soon as she found this suit of battle armor, she immediately hatched a bold plan that would take her down a unique path. Thus, she reported her plan to her superiors, and this was very risky as she had to abandon her suit of two-word battle armor for a chance to inherit another suit of battle armor. However, Xi Mengshan had always been very determined and resilient. In the end, Chen Xinji and Guan Yue had no choice but to support her idea. After all, they couldn't dissuade her, and there were many suits of battle armor left behind by the forefathers of the Battle God Hall, and if this proved to be a success, then it would be immensely beneficial to the recycling and reuse of these suits of battle armor. Thus, Xi Mengshan began her experiment, and it ended in a half success. She did manage to inherit this suit of battle armor and was able to make use of its full power to unleash devastating attacks. but this suit of battle armor hadn't been tailor-made for her, so it conflicted with her martial soul and resulted in major issues. As a result, using her battle armor and using her martial soul became two mutually exclusive facets of her arsenal, and that was being displayed here. The most fearsome aspect of this suit of battle armor was those first 3 consecutive strikes. The explosive power of those 3 strikes could perhaps overwhelm a limit Douluo if they were to try and face those attacks head-on. During its construction, this suit of 3-word battle armor had been geared toward maximizing strength, and it had actually been constructed by the Tang sect. As such, after failing to defeat her opponent or gain a decisive advantage after those first 3 strikes, Mengshan was already in a difficult predicament. Her speed was decent, but it was lacking compared to Uhenu, who excelled in flight, and it was very difficult for her to fly with this heavy suit of battle armor. Thus, Uhenu was able to open up some distance between them, and she was constantly being held at arm's length. Even though some of the poison had entered Uhenu's body, the effects were quite mild, and he was still able to outrun his opponent. Gradually, Uhenu began to realize the predicament that his opponent was in. She simply couldn't catch him. Her offensive prowess was incredible, but that didn't do her any good unless she could actually strike her opponent with her attacks. Having made that realization, Uhenu was feeling a lot more confident. A faint smile appeared on his face, and his attitude began to shift. Mengshan couldn't catch him, so he could just constantly bombard her with long-range attacks from afar, forcing her into a battle of attrition. As long as he remained patient and vigilant, the victory was his for the taking. Just as this thought began to form in Uhenu's mind, Mengshan suddenly drew to a halt. That's enough. I concede. She couldn't catch up to her opponent and was constantly being bombarded by holy light, so the final outcome was nothing more than a foregone conclusion. She wasn't inferior to her opponent in power, but his strengths made him a natural bane to her. If her opponent had inferior poison resistance or possessed less speed than her, then she would have already won. Up to this point, Shrek Academy had chalked up 3 wins and 1 tie. Even as Uhenu descended onto the ground, his gaze constantly remained on Mengshan, and he patted his own chest as he heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he had won the battle, he had done so in rather unconvincing fashion. In contrast with Shishi's victory, his was quite embarrassing, and he hadn't been able to display his true power at all. Sure enough, as soon as he returned to the Shrek Academy camp, Shishi immediately made his way over to him. Shut your mouth. I'm warning you. Uhenu said as he put on a menacing expression. Shishi splayed his hands open in a resigned manner, and said, Why do you have to be so cold? I came here to console you. Console me. Uhenu snapped. What a load of nonsense. You must be going to tell me that I was buzzing around like a headless fly during that battle, right? Shishi gave him a huge thumbs up. You said it yourself. I must say, your self-awareness has improved. Uhenu flared up with rage upon hearing this, and he really wanted to fight Shishi if not for his injuries. Then again, he wasn't sure if he could even defeat Shishi at this point. Tang Wuling didn't spare any attention to their quarrel. He was already used to their constant bickering. Meanwhile, the Battle God Hall camp was deathly silent. Mengshan made her way back to her colleagues, and of course, no one said anything to criticize her, but the Battle God Hall really was being thoroughly embarrassed here. Right at this moment, Arhang suddenly emerged from the Shrek Academy camp with an eager expression. He was rubbing his own bald head as he strode forward, and he immediately said, I want to challenge the first Battle God. Everyone immediately focused their attention on him upon hearing this. The Battle God Hall had thought that Shrek Academy would make strategic sacrifices on this level. For example, they could get one of their weaker members to challenge Guan Yue, then forfeit the match right away. This meant that it was possible for Tang Wuling to challenge the first or second Battle God. However, someone else from the Shrek Academy camp was challenging the first Battle God, which meant that there was a very good chance that Tang Wuling would be challenging Guan Yue. There was not much strategy involved in their approach. They were merely clashing with the Battle God Hall head-on. Tang Wuling was also quite surprised that Arhang had stepped forward so early. According to their plan, Shrek 6 monsters and Ling Zichen were supposed to go ahead of him, followed by Sima Jinkai and Tang Wuling. However, it was clear that he couldn't hold himself back any longer. The first Battle God made his way into the battle area. This was a stern-looking man who appeared to be in his 40s. Body Douluo Arhang of Shrek Academy. Please enlighten me. Arhang declared. A clear stir ran through the Battle God Hall camp upon hearing this Douluo title. Everyone knew what this title entailed. It was the inheritance of what was once one of the most powerful sects in the world. Chapter 1687. Only the past sect masters of the body sect had the right to inherit this title. First Battle God of the Battle God Hall. Rising Sun Douluo Aorui. Please enlighten me. Aorui responded in kind. As the first Battle God, he was ranked only below the Hall Master and Vice Hall Masters, and he was a rank 98 Hyper Douluo, only one step away from the limit Douluo level. The fact that the Body Douluo was an ally of Shrek Academy's was something that the Battle God Hall had been previously unaware of. Even though the body sect had fallen into decline, it had once reigned supreme over all other sects on this continent, and it was not to be disregarded. As such, Arhang's declaration of support towards Shrek Academy was going to force the Battle God Hall and even the entire Federation to reevaluate the Tang sect and Shrek Academy. At this moment, Arhang's gaze wasn't fixed on his opponent. Instead, he was appraising Mengshan from afar. He took a deep breath, and an unprecedentedly focused and serious look suddenly appeared in his eyes. His aura also became a lot more restrained and far less overbearing, and even Tang Wuling was only seeing this side of Arhang for the very first time. He had always known that beneath Arhang's rough and rowdy exterior was a very shrewd and intelligent mind. After he and Sima Jinkai had been tricked by Mira Douluo Zhang Wanyun, he had quickly realized what had happened and discussed this with Tang Wuling in private, but he never mentioned this to Sima Jinkai. If anyone were to judge Arhang by his cover, then they were about to be in for a rude awakening. A faint smile appeared on Arhang's face as he heaved a faint sigh, and he crossed his arms as the air around him shimmered and warped. He was over 30 years of age, fast approaching 40, yet he had never met a woman who had been able to capture his heart. He knew that his body was different from that of the average person. Due to the special body sect cultivation methods he had used since he was a child, he was simply far too strong for normal women to bear, which meant that he couldn't engage in physical relations with the average woman as he could easily slip up and kill them. As such, Arhang had always wanted to find a strong woman to become his wife. However, the strong ones were ugly, but the beautiful ones weren't strong. In his eyes, even a woman like Yuan Yue, who was internally very strong and resilient, wasn't to his liking. He wanted someone who was strong both on the inside and on the outside. Mengshan had quite a burly physique, but her facial features were still quite elegant, and it was love at first sight for Arhang. Let's hold on for a minute, Arhang said as he raised his hand. Aorui faltered slightly upon hearing this. What was this request? Were they not going to commence their battle right away? Arhang's lips trembled as he transmitted his voice toward Aorui. Old man Ao, I want to ask you something. Is the 7th Battle God married? Old man Ao. Aorui's eyelids twitched slightly upon hearing this. Were they supposed to be old friends or something? Even the palace masters didn't refer to him like this. Then again, this man was the current sect master of the body sect, so it wasn't entirely unacceptable for him to refer to the first Battle God in this manner. As such, Aorui wasn't offered any objections to this. However, why was he asking about Mengshan's marriage status? I think she had a boyfriend in the past, but they split up because she was too big for his liking. Aorui reflexively replied. As soon as the words escaped his mouth, he was left regretting his decision. What right did he have to tell someone else about Mengshan's private life? Arhang's eyes lit up upon hearing this, and he hurriedly asked, Did she find anyone after that? Aorui replied, I'm afraid that's not for me to tell. Arhang's expression fell slightly upon hearing this. Why you gotta be like this? Old man Ao, as the first Battle God, you should think for the sake of your colleagues. The Begonia Douluo should be around 40 years of age already, right? Don't you think she's lonely without a companion at this age? I'll admit that I've fallen in love with her at first sight. Can you create an opportunity for the two of us? Aorui didn't know how to respond. Was this guy supposed to be a comedian? If it weren't for the fact that Arhang was the current body Douluo, he would have already lashed out. All of the Battle Gods were titled Douluos, and at that level, everyone had a world of their own. Even as the first Battle God, he couldn't interfere with the personal lives of his colleagues, especially when it came to someone as cold and forbidding as Mengshan. Furthermore, this was happening right in the middle of a challenge, so technically, they were in opposition against the Battle God Hall. Surely it was inappropriate to be bringing up something like this now. However, it was clear that Arhang was fully serious about this, so Aorui couldn't just reject him outright. On top of that, just as he said, it was extremely difficult for someone like Mengshan to find a spouse. She was a titled Douluo at quite an advanced age when it came to marriage, and she didn't exactly fit the aesthetic mold that most men were searching searching for. With that in mind, Auru cast a hesitant gaze toward Yinland, who currently had her eyes closed as she reviewed her battle in her mind, so she didn't notice his scrutiny. However, the other battle gods all saw this, and they felt very befuddled. What were the two of them doing? Why did it look like they were having a chat? Weren't they supposed to be engaging in battle? After an extended period of contemplation, Auru replied, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. If you want to pursue the begonia Douluo, then you'll have to work hard yourself. I can't tell you anything. After all, this was only their first meeting, and even though Arhang held a very lofty status, it was difficult to say whether he would be a suitable match for Yinland. Arhang's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. If that's your decision, then I won't be holding back. Old man Ao. Auru almost rolled his eyes upon hearing this. Who needs you to hold back? I'm a rank 98 hyper Douluo, for God's sake. Auru was growing rather disgruntled from being slighted by his opponent, and he said, there's no need to hold back. Give me all you've got. Fine, I'll satisfy that request. Arhang harumphed coldly as he took a step forward. Before Auru even had a chance to react, an incredibly powerful aura had already erupted out of Arhang's body. The air began to buzz in a peculiar rhythmic manner, and a round wheel of light lit up behind Arhang acting as a glowing backdrop. As the wheel of light rose up, his enormous blood essence erupted out of his body, and the entire battle area instantly became scorching hot, as if magma were pouring out of the ground. Even Auru felt as if his blood had been ignited, and this was an extremely uncomfortable sensation. Chapter 1688. What powerful blood essence fluctuations. Auru had never faced a powerful being from the body sect before, and he had only heard about the state of the current body sect. The aura currently being displayed by Arhang had already exceeded his expectations. The members of the body sect used their bodies as their martial souls, and they were the most proficient soul masters when it came to bodily control in order to enhance their powers. Now, Auru was beginning to truly experience just what the human body was capable of at an extreme capacity. Arhang joined his palms in front of his own chest, and his entire body turned a reddish golden color, while his eyes had taken on a dazzling golden hue. At this moment, he didn't even look human anymore. Instead, he was looking like a divine Buddha. Arhang's transformation naturally drew the attention of both camps, and a hint of elation appeared in Tang Wulin's eyes upon seeing this. Arhang had finally reached the pinnacle of the body sect's congenital secret method. He didn't know when Arhang had made the breakthrough, but knew that this was a level that even he would never be able to reach. It was said that once a body Douluo cultivated the body sect's congenital secret method to its extreme, they would be able to attain this form, and at this level, their body would become powerful enough to rival that of a god. It could be said that this was the most powerful physical form of this world. With his golden dragon king bloodline, Tang Wulin was able to reach full mastery of the body sect's congenital secret method, but he could never reach that extreme pinnacle. After all, he wasn't the sect master of the body sect. There were many prerequisites that had to be satisfied before this form could be attained. For example, one had to begin building a foundation to cultivate the congenital secret method from birth. This was an extremely tortuous and perilous process, and the congenital secret method was also known as the process of creating a god. Tang Wulin had picked up the congenital secret method too late, and the fact that he had reached full mastery was already sufficient testament to his extraordinary aptitude, but never did. He thinks that Arhang would attain this invincible Vajra body, which no one had done for thousands of years. In reality, Arhang had Tang Wulin partially to thank for this. Tang Wulin had inspired him greatly during their sparring matches, conversations about the cultivation of the congenital secret method, and most importantly, his integration of the congenital secret method with his dragon's repulse. In addition to that, Arhang was also supremely talented, and he had finally achieved this form not long ago. Once a body Douluo attained this form, they would truly stand at the pinnacle of the soul master world, and on the back of this breakthrough, Arhang was able to progress to rank 97 in soul power. Furthermore, he wouldn't encounter any bottlenecks in his future cultivation until he reached the quasi-god level, and barring any mishaps, he would definitely reach that level in a very short time. Throughout history, all those who had attained this form had gone on to become quasi-gods. As such, Tang Wulin was ecstatic to see that Arhang had reached this level. Even though the two limit Douluos of the Yinland family had joined Shrek Academy, they weren't directly related to the academy. In contrast, Arhang was his senior disciple brother, and that was an extremely close bond. Once he became a quasi-god, Shrek Academy, the Tang sect, and even the body sect would all benefit immensely. In particular, the body sect would definitely enjoy a strong resurgence. The battle gods possessed extensive experience and knowledge when it came to martial souls, but they weren't sufficiently familiar with the body sect. Furthermore, it had been several thousand years since the invincible Vajra body had last appeared. Even in the entire history of the body sect, this was a lofty height that had only been reached a handful of times. As such, in the face of Arhang's invincible Vajra body, Auru could only sense that his opponent was extremely powerful and possessed ridiculously abundant blood essence, but he didn't know exactly what this form entailed. The other battle gods were also stunned to see this, but it was clear that they didn't know what this form signified either. In reality, Arhang hadn't planned to reveal this form so early, but he wanted to show off to his new love interest. In this form, his blood essence had been elevated to the extreme. Auru didn't dare to allow this to continue, and 9 black soul rings immediately appeared beneath his feet as a scintillating sun emerged above him. His martial soul was the sun. This had always been a type of top-tier martial soul, but it varied from person to person. For example, some were more inclined toward heat, while others were more inclined toward light. In Auru's case, his rising sun was the perfect combination of all of these factors, and it was renowned as the most powerful sun. 9 enormous balls of light instantly shot forth, hurtling directly toward Arhang. The air twisted and warped, and the humidity within the entire battle area instantly plummeted to zero. The heat from Arhang's blood essence and Auru's rising sun was making all of the light in the area shimmer and warp. A wide smile appeared on Arhang's face as he stepped forward and puffed his chest out, making no effort to evade as he met the 9 balls of light with his barrel chest. Boom! The first ball of light exploded on his body, but couldn't budge him even in the slightest. He then lowered his head and charged headfirst into the second ball of light, causing it to explode while he remained unscathed. After that came the third ball of light, then the fourth. By the time all 9 balls of light had exploded, the surrounding temperature had reached an extremely fearsome level. However, Arhang remained standing on the spot, and the reddish golden light radiating from his body had only become brighter. That was awesome. Keep the bath water coming. Arhang chortled as he strode directly toward Auru. As the first battle god, Auru was an extremely seasoned combatant, but he had never encountered a situation like this before. Was this guy even a human anymore? How was his defensive prowess this insane? The 9 consecutive star beads unleashed with his rank 98 soul power hadn't left so much as a single scratch on Arhang. This was downright unimaginable. All of a sudden, a pillar of bright light struck Arhang without any warning, and he was sent flying before crashing into the protective barrier in the distance. In the face of that pillar of light, he had made no attempt to evade or defend himself. Auru's brows furrowed tightly upon seeing this. He was confident in his own attack, but he could sense that the power of his attack hadn't managed to infiltrate his opponent's body. Sure enough, Arhang rose to his feet right after falling onto the ground, then dusted himself off before giving his opponent a wide smile. Right at this moment, his eyes abruptly lit up, and 2 beams of light erupted out of his eyes like lightning. His martial soul was his body, and any part of his body could be used as a weapon. Auru's rising sun transformed into a giant light shield before him, and the shield exploded as Auru took a half step backward. Meanwhile, Arhang massaged his own temples as he nodded to himself. That wasn't bad at all. At this point, Auru's expression had darkened significantly. This was the first time he had ever encountered such an opponent, and he felt as if he were facing a monster. Chapter 1689. Right at this moment, Arhang sprang into action, rushing toward Auru like a golden cannonball. Auru immediately responded by releasing his suit of battle armor. His opponent's physical prowess was off the charts, while he excelled in energy attacks, so he definitely couldn't allow Arhang to get close to him. A suit of golden battle armor appeared over his entire body, and there was an extremely eye-catching ruby at the direct center of his helmet, giving him a valiant appearance. Dazzling golden light rose up from beneath his feet, and the surrounding air became extremely viscous, while the ground had transformed into a scorching pool of lava that enveloped Arhang from all sides. After rushing into the pool of lava, Arhang's speed was greatly impacted, and fearsome pillars of fire erupted forth to send him flying once again. Arhang was completely unfazed by this, and he leapt into the pool of lava again before swimming within it in a casual manner. What a fantastic bath! All of the battle gods were astonished to see this. They were all well aware of how fearsome Auru's attacks were. His powers were truly fearsome enough to melt mountains and and boil seas. However, in the face of the body Douluo, all of his attacks seemed to have become a joke. Pillars of light and fire rained down in a torrential barrage, and even an actual mountain would have most likely already melted away. Our was throwing everything at Arhang, but none of his attacks were achieving anything other than sending Arhang flying over and over again. What could he do? Even Guan Yue was becoming increasingly alarmed as he spectated the battle from afar. Our wasn't a limit Douluo yet, but in terms of pure offensive prowess, he wasn't far off from Guan Yue's level. If he were in Our place, would he be able to defeat this body Douluo? It was very hard to say. At this point, Tang Wulin had already figured out that his senior disciple brother had only recently attained this invincible Vajra body, and was using Our to test his own limits. Furthermore, he was using this extreme light and heat to further refine and consolidate this new form. His opponent clearly hadn't identified this yet. Otherwise, he wouldn't be allowing Arhang to take advantage of the situation like this. However, as a body sex disciple himself, this was very apparent to Tang Wulin. Many of the body sex cultivation methods required withstanding physical trauma for progression, so Arhang was intentionally provoking his opponent so that Our would unleash even more fearsome attacks. After reaching the title Douluo level, all soul masters received significant stamina boosts due to the formation of soul cores. However, unleashing such a ferocious barrage was still very taxing on one's soul power, and after maintaining this fearsome assault for 10 minutes straight, Our had to stop to catch his breath. Meanwhile, the air around Arhang was twisting due to the extreme temperatures, but he remained completely unscathed. He turned to Our with a wide smile and said, "Can you tell me more about her now, old man? Now, look how good I've been to you. I haven't attacked you even once, and I've been holding back this entire time." Our immediately flared up with rage. "I don't need you to hold back. Come at me." "All right, you asked for it. It's about time I went on the offensive." Arhang suddenly squatted down as he spoke, and as he did so, the entire battle god hall trembled slightly. Even the protective barrier was struggling to contain this pressure. In the next instant, Arhang sprang up before crashing directly toward Our like a reddish golden shooting star. In response, Our instantly retreated and fused as one with the scintillating sun behind him to unleash his martial soul true body. At the same time, he released his domain halo again, and the sea of lava reappeared. Boom! Arhang crashed directly into the radiant sun, and it exploded into balls of fire that erupted in all directions, sweeping across the entire battle area. Arhang landed on the ground before rubbing his own bald head, while a figure was sent flying out of the shattered sun, only just barely managing to steady itself and avoid crashing into the protective barrier. This was none other than the rising sun Douluo, and his martial soul true body had just been destroyed by Arhang like a freight train. "Come on then." Arhang roared as his body abruptly swelled to the same height as the protective barrier. He slammed his fists into the protective barrier with devastating force, and the entire battle area quaked violently amid a resounding boom. Immediately thereafter, he doubled over and slammed his fists onto the ground amid another thunderous boom. The protective barrier was almost unable to withstand the fearsome shockwaves unleashed by his strikes, and even Our was forced to curl up into a ball to weather the devastating storm. Even so, his entire body was trembling violently, and it was as if in the very air had become his enemy. In the face of this almighty opponent, he was struck by an unprecedented sense of powerlessness. Arhang's giant fists came crashing toward Our, and Our was unable to even evade. If the battle area were of a sufficient size, perhaps he could try and contend with his opponent, but in this limited space, there was no way for him to take evasive measures. As such, he had no choice but to fight fire with fire, unleashing his night soul skills. Rising Sun Yang Core, a terrifying explosion erupted, and Arhang was sent stumbling backward as scorching flames that actually posed a threat to him were ignited on his body for the first time. However, Our had also been sent flying by the devastating punch, crashing into the protective barrier, where he remained as if he had been glued there. Arhang quickly snuffed out the flames by slapping them with his hands, then smiled as all of the golden light radiating from his body injected itself into his right fist. Fearsome golden light erupted directly toward Our, and all Our could do was unleash his night soul skill over and over again to oppose his opponent's attacks. However, there seemed to be no end to Arhang's attacks as his punches rained down like machine gun fire, creating a relentless barrage that refused to afford Our any respite. The most fearsome part about the invincible Vajra body was the near limitless stamina. Only now did Tang Wulin understand why Arhang had told him that he didn't want a suit of forward battle armor. Once one attained the invincible Vajra body, they would no longer be able to wear battle armor, and nor would they need it. The invincible Vajra body was superior even to the average suit of forward battle armor, granting one limitless stamina and energy. As such, the invincible Vajra body's stamina was unmatched, and upon reaching the quasi-god level, Arhang would be virtually unkillable. Perhaps his offensive prowess wasn't enough for him to defeat all opponents, but the problem was that he was virtually unkillable. If Arhang could reach the quasi-god level, then he would have no issues at all escaping from 2 or 3 other quasi-gods. At this moment, Our was facing the full extent of Arhang's power, and there was nothing he could do aside from hold on for dear life. Chapter 1690. His attacks weren't powerful enough to defeat Arhang, but if he ceased to attack, he would be overwhelmed by his opponent's attacks. Never had Our ever experienced such an awkward battle. Having cultivated for so many years, he had encountered all types of strange opponents, but this one simply rendered him completely powerless. Furthermore, he was confident that even Guan Yue wouldn't fare much better than him in the same situation. No matter how powerful you were, it didn't matter if you couldn't pose a substantial threat to your opponent. At the moment, both sides were rapidly expending soul power, but his opponent's attacks were only becoming more and more fearsome. What could he do? As the first battle god, he couldn't afford to lose. His defeat would have a massive symbolic importance, not to mention the fact that the battle god hall had already suffered 3 losses and a tie. Thus, Our persevered with gritted teeth, and he could only hope that his opponent wouldn't be able to maintain this form for too long. He was confident in his own soul power reserves, and his opponent definitely wasn't at rank 98 yet. However, he was underestimating the invincible Vajra body. Upon attaining this form, one would possess immunity to all negative status effects, as well as become impervious to all poisons. Furthermore, all energy-based control system soul skills were ineffective against him. All of the energy between heaven and earth could nourish him, so it was virtually impossible to outlast the duration of his invincible Vajra body. There were only 2 ways to defeat him, one of which was to unleash an attack so devastating that it could instantly overwhelm his defensive capabilities, while the second option was to have several powerful beings taking turns to battle him until his invincible Vajra body ran out. However, neither of those options were easy to fulfill. The invincible Vajra body wasn't actually the body of a god, but it really was very close to that level, and it granted one at least 3 times the stamina of a normal soul master of the same caliber. Arhang had only reached this level recently, so he hadn't achieved the 3-fold enhancement yet, but 2-fold was not an issue. He was also a hyper Douluo, and even though Our possessed a higher cultivation rank than he did, his soul power reserves certainly went twice those of Arhang's. It was already becoming apparent that Au's attacks were becoming weaker, while Arhang seemed to be growing more powerful the longer the battle dragged on. Guan Yue sighed as he cast his gaze toward Tang Wulin, then communicated something to him through voice transmission. Tang Wulin nodded in response. This match has been going on for too long, and I don't think either side can defeat the other, so how about we call it a tie and allow my senior disciple brother to progress to the next level? Guan Yue immediately replied without any hesitation. All right, well do as you say, Sex Master Tang. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face as he turned toward the battle area. Senior disciple brother, you can stop now. That was a really fun battle. As expected, this feeling can only come from battling a formidable opponent. Arhang chortled as he slowly reverted back to his original size. The only item of clothing that remained on his body was a pair of golden knee-length shorts, while the bulging muscles of his upper body were completely bared. Our descended onto the ground, and his face was quite pale, while his chest was heaving incessantly. If Arhang had continued that assault, he really wouldn't have been able to hold on for much longer. He was too embarrassed to say anything and made his way directly back to the battle god hall camp. It was obvious to everyone that if Tang Wulin hadn't called off the match as a gesture of good faith, Our would have definitely been defeated. Guan Yue couldn't help but even internalize as he looked at Tang Wulin. The young people of this generation were truly formidable. Arhang also made his way out of the battle area, but instead of returning to the Shrek Academy, he was following along behind Our. Over here, senior disciple brother, you're going the wrong way. Tang Wulin hurriedly called out. Arhang turned to him with a smile on his face. It's all right, I have something I need to take care of, so give me a moment. He emerged from the light barrier as he spoke, then made his way directly over to Ximengshan. At this moment, Ximengshan was still in shock, just just as all of the other battle gods were. This was the first time they had seen a battle style like Arhang's, and in their eyes, he was like a monster. In the face of such an opponent, none of them could think of a good strategy. For some reason, Xi Mengshan's heart rate began to rise at the sight of the approaching Arhang. She could clearly sense the scorching blood essence fluctuations emanating from his body. Alongside his intoxicating masculine aura, Arhang stopped only one step away from her, and she appraised him with a wary gaze. I think you need a strong man, Arhang said in a very earnest manner. All of the battle gods' expressions instantly changed upon hearing this. Some of them were stunned, some were amused, and some were enraged. If it weren't for the incredible power that Arhang had displayed, one of the battle gods would have most likely already sent him flying with an almighty slap. Piss off. Xi Mengshan said in a cold voice. Arhang ignored her, and flexed his own bicep as he said, you can see that I'm very strong, and your poison won't work on me. There's no man more suitable for you than me, and I also need a strong woman. Piss off. Xi Mengshan's voice called even further, and her hands had already balled up into tight fists. Everyone from the Shrek Academy camp was also astonished. No one could have anticipated that he would suddenly pull a stunt like this. Tang Wuolin hurriedly made his way over to the opposing camp. There were 11 battle gods over there. What if they were to attack Arhang together in a fit of rage? If a chaotic scuffle were to break out, then their plan would be negatively impacted. After all, their ultimate objective wasn't just to challenge the battle god hall. Arhang seemed to be completely oblivious to Xi Mengshan's frosty demeanor, and just as Tang Wuolin was rushing over to him, he knelt down on one knee with a serious expression and said, "Marry me. You'll be my only woman. No other woman can handle me." On this occasion, Xi Mengshan didn't say anything, and her eyes were slightly out of focus as she stared at Arhang. An incredible thought sprang into Tang Wuolin's mind upon seeing this, and he reflexively drew to a halt. Right at this moment, Xi Mengshan suddenly reached out to accept Arhang's outstretched hand. All right. Deathly silence descended over everyone, and it was as if all of the bystanders had been transformed into stone statues. Arhang's proposal had been extremely brief, and Xi Mengshan's reply was even more concise. Everyone looked on in astonishment as Arhang rose to his feet, then led Xi Mengshan over to the Shrek Academy camp while still holding onto her hand. As he arrived before Tang Wuolin, he smiled and said, "Look what I brought back, junior disciple brother. What do you think?" Tang Wuolin had never admired anyone more than his senior disciple brother in this moment. Xi Mengshan's expression remained cold and aloof, as if it was someone else's hand being held by Arhang. Tang Wuolin forcibly repressed his shock and said, "Welcome. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read."